The preseason is over. We've got roster cuts coming up in about 4 days, so there's a lot of Colts news going on. We're going to get in touch with the audience here, see what you guys want to talk about. But we've got quite a few things on the docket. We're going to just discuss last night's game pretty quickly, and then we're going to go over what my predictions for the final 53-man roster are. We'll just go down that position by position. That's going to be plenty to fill the show on its own, but you guys, as always, welcome to throw in your questions, your comments in the chat. I'll get to all of them. We'll discuss every question you guys have. So if there's anything you guys want to talk about, just throw it in the chat right now, and let's get after it. 27-14, the final score of the final preseason game, Colts versus the Bengals. I just had to Google that. I didn't remember the score at all. Really wasn't paying that close of attention to what was going on the scoreboard, but I mean, they got the win. I guess when you've got 17 days until your first regular season game, you kind of want to carry a little bit of that momentum. So that's, I guess, never going to be a bad thing. But yeah, really more focused on those first team players getting that about a quarter and a half, maybe a little bit less on defense and a little bit more on offense of work in. So we got to get a good look at the first team. But really what I was watching was those second, third team guys, those fringe roster guys, just a couple positions more closely than others, just to kind of take a look at who would be those cuts or who's kind of got the lead on the depth chart, who's getting most of those reps on special teams, defense, offense. So we'll just go real quick thoughts on the game. Anthony Richardson had that first drive. The whole Colts offense had that first drive. Was really looking good. Was 7 of 8 for that, with that ending in that TD to A.D. Mitchell at the end. Really kind of a brutal tackle going into the end zone. I don't know if you guys saw that. Getting wrapped up around the neck and getting thrown down there. Ripping his helmet off. So glad he came up unscathed on that. But that should be the first of many touchdowns for A.D. Mitchell. Hopefully more to come this year. But lots of throws, lots of completions just in that quick passing game from Anthony Richardson, which was impressive and good to see. Good to see that timing. Good to see that it was like a third down, quick hot read to Alec Pierce for about a 9-yard gain on third down, where he recognized the pressure at the beginning, pre-snap, and got it out quick to Alec Pierce. Alec Pierce was on the same page. You like to see that, which wasn't something that happened the entire game. You had Kylan Granson and Anthony Richardson have that miscommunication that led to that pick six. Obviously, that's going to be the thing that everybody kind of keys on. That kind of kicked off the whole he's inaccurate, we're doomed kind of talk that was going on. The whole Joe Flacco quarterback controversy that Kirk Herbstreit started to bring up after that kind of all kicked off after that play. So from there, he threw that pick six, and then he comes back out and he keeps struggling with some inaccuracies. We had that throw down the middle to Michael Pittman, which all over the broadcast, they were just talking about how he needs to make a better throw there. But I feel like you're paying Michael Pittman Jr. as much as you're paying him. You need to have him make that catch 9.5 times out of 10. So that was a little bit disappointing that he didn't get the support that he needed on that play. Really, right after that, that was 2nd and 6. And then you go to 3rd and 6, and A.D. Mitchell runs that deep cross, or that crosser across the middle. He beats the cornerback across his face, and then kind of has some free run after that. And then Anthony Richardson just doesn't set his feet for whatever reason, kind of skymails that. So just something that you are a little bit concerned about. I mean, you're kind of expecting that. It's easy to get caught up in the moment. I think especially when he's throwing to a guy like A.D. Mitchell that has all this high upside, and you just want to kind of see those guys connect, and you want to see them connect early. But yeah, just kind of have to live with that stuff. The kind of offense that they were running, he was just being a pure drop back passer last night, which isn't something you're going to see in the regular season. They weren't really sprinkling in any runs. There was no really real threat of that. He was trying not to scramble. I think he only got past the line of scrimmage that right near the end of his final drive. It might have been the last play that he did. It was a third down, quite a bit of distance, and I think he got a 2 or 3 yard gain and took a hit there. That was the first hit that he took all game, and maybe that was the good time to yank him out of the game after that one, because you don't want to see too many more of that. But overall, not really discouraged. I think maybe you're a little bit disappointed because you'd like to see the offense especially come out and light the world on fire. I think if you didn't have that opening drive where they had all that success, you'd be a little bit more worried than you are right now. But you at least saw that they have that in them. They have that rhythm in them. Anthony Richardson can make those quick decisions. I don't know if that first drive was scripted. I don't know how much scripting they do to begin a preseason game, but at least in those plays, you saw what the offense and how efficient that can be, even if they were going against second and third team guys in Cincinnati. Anything you guys want to talk about the game that happened? I know that's kind of coming into this episode. My secondary concern is talking about the game specifically and what happened, just because you can only glean so much from a preseason performance. But the roster cuts are coming up, and that's kind of what I've been focusing on. But more than happy to go over anything that happened last night you have questions about. Spencer Schrader getting the field goals. I saw him. A lot of people talking about a kicker controversy. That not really a kicker controversy. All right. If that's all on the game, I did pose a question before we went live, just so this was anyone who popped in early could answer this. I was just asking who's going to be the surprise cut this year. Because I feel like every year we put out our roster predictions, we're trying to figure out who's going to get cut, who's not. Everything makes sense to us when we're going through it. And then there's always one random player out of nowhere, maybe more than one, that you're just kind of surprised gets cut. Everybody's kind of worried about the fan base is up in arms because for letting a guy go. That would be Darius Rush last year. Nobody really was projecting him to be cut when they did these predictions. So I feel like there's always going to be one guy that's kind of catching everybody off guard. So I went ahead and asked you guys what you guys thought there. Truett chimed in on YouTube before we started here. Yeah, I'm not sure this would be as surprising as some of the other suggestions that we've had, but he says Bean or Slovis. I do expect them to be off of the 53-man roster, and I don't think I'm groundbreaking in saying that. He does say I don't think they'd cut Sam. He said as long as he's been here, he's never complained. I feel like Sam's a classic team guy. But yeah, okay, we'll just get into it. I'm gonna throw this up here just because I've just got these slides together of who I've got projecting to make it onto the 53-man roster. We'll just start with the quarterback since Truett brought them up immediately. So this is something that I was kind of feeling a couple days ago, and it's kind of gone on. But since then, some people who know quite a bit more than me have come out saying they don't expect Sam Ehlinger to be a third quarterback on the roster. As it stands right now, I do have Anthony Richardson, Joe Flacco, and Sam Ehlinger. I do have them keeping three quarterbacks. Some very smart people, Locked On, Jake Arthur and Zach Hicks, both colleagues that I work with over here at horseshoehuddle.com. Both in their projections expected Sam to be off of the 53, maybe a guy that they look to have back on their practice squad, which is definitely possible. The Athletics' James Boyd just put out a roster prediction where he has Sam Ehlinger not making the cut. I think Mike Chappell said something on Twitter yesterday about how he might be someone on the practice squad. So, I mean, take that for what you will. I think those guys are going to be a little bit more in the know than I am, but I'm throwing out Sam Ehlinger as somebody they keep on the roster. Just kind of looking at how their quarterback room is constructed. And you've got Anthony Richardson, who missed a lot of time last year. You're praying that doesn't happen again, but there's always something. And then you have a 38-year-old Joe Flacco backing him up, who can only be as durable as a 38-year-old man playing in a league full of 22-year-old athletic freaks can be. So you're kind of hedging your bets there, holding on to Sam Ehlinger as the third quarterback, not exposing him to the waiver wire or to free agency, to the market where someone else can snatch him up to be a second quarterback or get a different job elsewhere. And then you have Jason Bean, Keaton Slovis, two undrafted guys who've definitely impressed this preseason, this camp. I think the injury to Jason Bean that came up last night, I think is interesting, trying to figure out whether he's going to be a guy how serious is that injury? Is he someone you're going to get onto IR, which essentially keeps him in the building, keeps him in the organization without having to use a roster spot on him, without having to cut him or expose him to waivers? So I guess that's a situation to monitor. I think if he's healthy, they want to bring him back on the practice squad. Keaton Slovis also, I mean, depending on what's happening with Jason Bean, if he's going on IR, depending on what's happening with Sam Ehlinger, if they bring him back to the practice squad or if they keep him on the roster. I do think one of those two, of Bean or Slovis, will be on the practice squad. I'm not sure if it's going to be both. I guess it all depends on what they do at the top there with those first three guys. We got Man of Renown with the comment saying Flacco's more durable than AR, which, yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, historically you could say that. I think just the playing style of Anthony Richardson's going to put him in harm's way a little bit more. I don't know how necessarily their bodies are hanging up. Sean in the chat. Hey, appreciate you watching, Sean. Appreciate the support. Drake Wally in the chat, the legend from the Horseshoe Huddle podcast here on the channel, suggesting Blake Freeland as a surprise cut. Kicked ass yesterday. Yeah, I mean, that was an improvement over what he's been putting out there on film. We had him switch over to the right side. It was interesting. The whole second team unit kind of swapped sides, where Dalton Tucker, who's normally been playing right guard, switched over to the left. Matt Gonsalves been playing on the right, switched over to the left, and then you had the guys who were on the right switching over, or guys that were playing on the left switch over to the right. And maybe that's just a better position for him. Maybe that's something more natural to Freeland. Either way, I do think it was smart of them to kind of test those depth guys at those spots, just to see if, for versatility's sake, if somebody goes down on either side of the line, you're not really wanting to roster a guy who's really stuck playing one side of the line, and then you just kind of have to shift everything else. So you'd like your versatile backups to be versatile backups, and not just guys that can plug into one of the 5 spots. NFL Nerd with a comment saying Bean versus Ehlinger, which I don't think is as crazy as what we would have thought going into camp. I think with the new emergency quarterback rule that I did have to do some asking around about, right? Because it's changed over the last 2 years. You can have a guy on the practice squad that you designate as your emergency quarterback for regular season games this year when you elevate them. So if they're only going with 2 quarterbacks on the roster, like some people have predicted they're going to, then maybe it's not even a case of Sam Ehlinger versus Jason Bean when it comes to who's you're going to be your third guy. It might just be whichever of the 2 you can get on your practice squad without having another team take a chance on them. Maybe Jason Bean has even shown enough to be somebody that a team takes a chance on. But yeah, with that emergency quarterback rule, I do feel like less teams across the league are going to hold on to a third quarterback. And I think that does make it a little more likely that you get a guy like Ehlinger or Bean back on the practice squad. Over under how many games before AD Mitchell throws his helmet after AR misses him wide open again? I think AD Mitchell has had a really cool, just kind of the attitude that he's had since coming in has been kind of the opposite of what people were speculating a little bit about when he was coming out in the draft. Just really has kind of shown to be a team guy and patient and willing to kind of do whatever roles asked of him. We'll see kind of how that progresses throughout the year. I know you've got to kind of play it safe as a rookie coming into training camp, just trying to make a good impression. So we'll kind of see. But AR, yes, he's definitely going to miss some throws high. He's going to miss some throws high to every receiver. He's going to miss some throws low to every receiver. It's going to be an up and down year with him. But I think playing with a guy as talented as AR is, I think as fans, we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I feel like the players are going to give him the benefit of the doubt and give him a little bit of a leash on that also. Hopping over to running backs. This is something that I think was more controversial earlier. Just because they usually keep 3 running backs. But they have, I think, 4 guys they would love to keep on the roster right now. Tyler Goodson and Evan Hull being those guys that are battling for 3 and 4. I did put out a piece earlier on horseshoehuddle.com today, kind of asking the question if they're keeping 3 or 4. Ultimately, I said if they were keeping 3, I think Tyler Goodson would be the guy that keeps the edge. But looking at kind of how they're stacking up here, these 4 players, you're worried a little bit about Trey Sermon and his hamstring injury. And just kind of how serious that might be and how long that might keep him out. So when you're going into the season and you've got your primary backup who you're not sure is healthy, then you would want to keep on or keep hold of two guys that you kind of have grown to trust in the backfield in Hull and Goodson. So I do expect them to keep 4. This was kind of a little bit trickier when we were going back and forth with 4 or 5 tight ends. And you were thinking, oh, if they keep Jelani Woods on the roster and Will Mallory, and then you have 5 tight ends, you kind of have to free up a roster spot somewhere else. And I was thinking that running back might be that spot. We might get Evan Hull fallen victim to the cuts. But that situation kind of cleared itself out now, and I think they have the opportunity to hold on to both Goodson and Hull, and I think they want to do that. Receivers here is going to be controversial too, because I only have them keeping 5, which means that they've got Ashton Doolin and DJ Montgomery to a lesser degree on the chopping block here. I think those first 5, it's pretty unanimous amongst everybody that those first 5 are the top 5. I think the main question has just been 5 or 6. And for a team last year that they showed they were pretty comfortable kind of rolling with the punches with a small amount of wide receivers. They went into week 1 with 3 wide receivers on the roster, and they were kind of just bouncing these practice squad guys, DJ Montgomery, Juwan Winfrey, Tyreek Cleveland, bouncing them up and down off the practice squad into the active roster for game day, just kind of maxing out as many times as they could do that, and really kind of went into that whole beginning of the season with less people at the position than most teams would do. So they've shown a comfortability with that. So Ashton Doolin, I included him in my piece that I put on horseshoehuddle.com today about just a guy that hasn't had a ton of opportunities to impress this coaching staff. He's been with the team. I did find that out. He's been with the team since 2019. He's the longest tenured receiver in the room, just 1 year more than Michael Pittman Jr. So this is a little bit of it's bittersweet seeing that come to an end. But then you've got A.D. Mitchell, you've got Anthony Gould, you've got these young guys coming in that kind of replace that. Definitely entirely plausible that they hold on to him, though. He came back. He missed 2 weeks of training camp and preseason games this preseason with a hamstring injury that he was battling, even though he's been back and recovered from that ACL. So that, again, kind of reduced the opportunities he had to show anything. But he was back last night playing, and he was on first team playing outside gunner, his old spot where he earned a second team All-Pro in 2021. So, I mean, if he's convinced the staff, or if the staff is convinced that he can be the same guy he was before his injury on special teams, I do think that's someone they keep. Here, he just kind of fell victim to them trying to keep some extra players elsewhere. That now Sam Ellinger, if he's one of those guys that they cut and they do go with 2 corners or 2 quarterbacks, that does open up a spot here. I think Ashton Doolin would be one of those first guys that would grab that open roster spot. Tight ends. This is a hot topic from earlier that is no longer so hot. We got some news today. Jordan Scholes of Bleacher Report reporting that Mo Alley-Cox had surgery for turf toe, would be out for 4 months, so he's not really looking at a return until Christmas, maybe a little bit after week 16 there. So then you're just looking at 2 games, 3 if you're lucky, if there's no setbacks. He's one of those guys that I think you're going to place on IR. You get 2 of these at cut down day this year, where you can put 2 of these guys on IR without subjecting them to waivers. Then you can designate for a return later in the season. So I think Jelani Woods is a no-brainer to be one of those guys. And then you've got those 4 that were kind of fighting with Jelani Woods for those roster spots anyway. And Kylan Granson, Mo Alley-Cox, Drew Ogletree, and Will Mallory. Jordan Murray actually flashed off an impressive catch. So maybe he's a guy that comes back to the practice squad. He's, once again, one of those move tight end types. He's not as much an inline guy, so he's going to be more of a receiving threat, while Eric Tomlinson's that inline guy. So I guess it kind of depends. Pick your flavor on what you want for tight end on the practice squad when you're kind of looking at which guys to bring back there. And here's Blake Freeland. Offensive tackles, I have him keeping 4. So Drake, I don't have Blake Freeland getting cut in my projection here. Bernard Ryman, Braden Smith, Matt Gonsalves, Blake Freeland. I think they like Blake Freeland, and I think they had to throw him into some tough situations last year. They obviously aren't going to give up on Gonçalves at this point. So I think those four are pretty safe. Now, what might happen is if you see a guy that Ballard and the staff have really kind of keyed on and identified that gets cut somewhere else, I think this could be a possible replacement. So if you see an offensive tackle cut from another team, and Ballard kind of likes them, makes the claim, they get awarded him, then that could come at the cost of Blake Freeland's roster spot. But I don't expect it to happen immediately, and I think there would have to be some special circumstances for them to move on from Blake Freeland at this point. And then Jake Witt, another guy, rookie from last year, who missed last season, kind of in that mold of Blake Freeland, developmental guy. So I think they'll try to bring him back and continue on with his development. We got a YouTube comment saying Bean and the rookie kicker are being surprise cuts. Which one you hoping we keep there? The rookie kicker, Spencer Schrader out of Notre Dame. Kind of awesome that he stepped in for Rigoberto Sanchez in week 2, doing both holding, which I'd say didn't go so well, but his punts were impressive for someone who was brought in to be a place kicker. And then he nailed that 50-plus yarder last night. So maybe that's a guy you keep on the practice squad or you bring back just to kind of be a versatile backup to both of those guys. I'm not sure how much they'll value having a kicker on the practice squad, but he's definitely shown the skills that he can kind of step in whatever situation you've got going on there. Interior offensive line. This one might be surprising because I don't have Tanner Bortolini on the final roster here. I think if he was healthy, he would make it. But he is dealing with a toe injury. We don't know how serious that is. I think the Colts do have an opportunity here to put him on either IR designated for return or the PUP list at the beginning of the year and kind of free up that roster spot. Which might be a little bit discouraging for Bortolini, but I think he's a guy that wasn't really going to get a ton of playing time early regardless. Danny Pinter they like at center. I think he could play, or he would probably get the start over Bortolini if there was something to go down with Ryan Kelly. So I think Bortolini was kind of third in that pecking order at center. So maybe that's somebody, depending on what his injury is like and kind of how they're feeling about these other guys in Pinter and Tucker. Maybe Bortolini's a guy that goes on one of these injury lists. And then I've got the undrafted free agent out of Marshall, Dalton Tucker, making guard. He's been playing second team right guard all through training camp, through the preseason, and then yesterday he switched over to left guard. It was a little bit rougher there at left guard. The performance was not as good, but he stood in there. And obviously he's a guy that they trust in those situations. So we've got him holding on to Pinter for another year and having an undrafted free agent make the roster. So that's a total of 9 offensive linemen. That's a number I think they're comfortable with. 10 wouldn't be out of the question. So maybe Tanner Bortolini doesn't go on one of those injury lists and he does make the final 53. But yeah, that's kind of really looking at the guys on the roster. They're pretty thin in terms of excess. I think they like their 9 or 10 that they would have. But beyond that, I don't think they're going to be too broken up about parting ways with these other guys. A YouTube comment from Nathan. I appreciate that. Nathan, he's asking if Sam did enough to be the third string quarterback. I think Sam has always done enough to be the third string quarterback. I think if the Colts don't end up rostering him as the third string quarterback, he's going to be the third string quarterback on the practice squad regardless for the Colts, or he's going to end up being a third string quarterback. Or maybe even a second string quarterback for another team elsewhere. I don't think the Colts have had any qualms about how Sam's handled his business, kind of how the production that he's had or the progression that he's showed. I think they're happy with that. It's just going to come down to a numbers game with Sam and kind of how that emergency quarterback rule kind of helps them out and how they want to play with that. But other than that, yeah, I don't think the Colts are disappointed. I think Sam's done what he could have done. Him being in the first or the final year of his contract, I do think this is, if they don't move on from him at cut downs and he takes a spot somewhere else, I do think this is going to be the final year of Sam Ehlinger with the Colts, unless they just really see something and don't bring back Flacco next year and they decide that Sam's going to be their number 2. But that's something that they haven't really shown a lot of faith in him before, so I'm not sure I'm expecting that to happen. Moving on to the defensive side, defensive tackles. This is a spot I think they would want to keep 5, but numbers just strictly dictating that they can only keep 4. Just kind of how I have these predictions going right now. And the odd man out here would be Taven Bryan, veteran who they had for 1 year last season, has been playing out of position at nose tackle, even though he's more of a 3-tech, a pure pass rushing kind of defensive tackle. That's where his skill set's at. But yet, even though they brought him back in free agency for a 1-year deal, I do have them parting ways here, just because mainly because of the progression of Adetomiwa Adebawore, and kind of what he's shown this preseason, this training camp, and the leap that he's made, and how he's kind of in that same skill set as Taven Bryan, where he's not that much of a run stuffer, but he is this pass rushing threat. I think him and Taven Bryan would be competing for the same snaps. Ideally, I think they'd like to have them both, because they like to have these lines of rotation, just so they don't have any tired bodies. They always have fresh legs on the field. But I do think Raekwon Davis here being able to take over at that backup nose also makes Taven Bryan a little bit more expendable. We saw while Raekwon Davis was dealing with that high blood pressure issue this training camp, that Taven Bryan was taking those backup nose tackle reps over Eric Johnson. With Raekwon Davis back, I think your need for Taven Bryan to take those backup nose tackle reps goes away, and your need for him to be as a pass rusher goes away since the ascension of Adebawore. So I think he is definitely the 5th man when it comes to this defensive tackle unit. And I think they'd like to keep 5, but we'll kind of see what happens at other positions when the final roster breakdown comes out to see whether or not they keep him. 5, though, on the defensive end side is what I have them keeping. Last year, I believe they kept 5 defensive tackles and 4 defensive ends at roster cutdown. And then they waived McTelvin Agim when they saw Isaiah Land hit the waiver wire off of the Cowboys roster last season. So they claimed Isaiah Land to go down to 4 defensive tackles and 5 defensive ends. I think that's kind of how it plays out here, where they opt to keep a guy like Isaiah Land on the end instead of keeping Taven Bryan, your 5th defensive tackle. So the group of defensive ends I have: Kwity Paye, Laiatu Latu, Taekwon Lewis, Dio Adengbo, Isaiah Land. I think those first 4 are kind of obvious, Kwity and Latu. And then your kind of versatile guys who can kick in, kick out, depending on what down or what the situation is in Taekwon and Dio Adengbo. Samson Ebukam, guy that tore his Achilles and has been kind of sitting on the roster at this point with no immediate moves to move him over to injured reserve. So you kind of question, it is that torn Achilles. Do players come back from that fast enough? It would be like in the playoffs, if anything, if he came back. So I don't know if they've been holding out hope for that, just because that's the respect that they kind of have for Ebukam, the kind of player that he is and the kind of impact that he can have. So maybe he's one of those guys that they also designate for return and move to IR at the beginning of the season when roster cuts come around. So I guess we'll kind of see or get some final clarity on that, whether or not they think he's going to come back is how they're going to handle what injured reserve list they put him on. So we'll have to see on that. Linebackers, 5 of them on my roster. I don't know if this is the number that they want to keep, or if they want to keep more than that. I feel just kind of like the talent level at other positions has sort of dictated this to be what it is. The 5 that I have them keeping would be Zaire Franklin, EJ Speed, Segun Alubi, Jalen Carlisle, the rookie, and then special teamer Grant Stewart, which I think is enough. You've got guys also on the roster who would be being cut in this scenario who have some experience playing a little bit of defense, but mostly special teams. Guys like Cameron McGrone or Austin Ajaki. Then you've got Craig Young, undrafted free agent, who I think that they like and would like to have back on the practice squad. He hasn't got a ton of run, but when he's been in there, he's made some impressive plays, specifically in coverage, which is the type of linebacker I think you're really trying to pick out. So he'd be a good guy to keep on the practice squad to develop. Whether or not the new kickoff rules determine that they need to keep 6 linebackers, maybe even 7. I'm not sure how they're going to play that. I think 5 seems like a pretty standard number for where we're at right now. And then I think we have the position that's going to cause sort of the most heartbreak, because I'm not expecting both rookies to make it here. So I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a Darius Rush situation from last season, where you've got a 5th rounder or a 6th rounder getting cut from the roster here. So what I have them keeping, I do have them keeping 6. 5 could also be in play, but I have them keeping 6 here with Kenny Moore, obviously. Then you've got 2 guys on the outside starting, Jalen Jones and Juju Brents. And then you kind of have your 2 immediate backups on the outside. Dallas Flowers being one of them for sure. And then I have a typo on the presentation here, but Darrell Baker Jr. Being that other outside guy. His competition for that spot would be between Amir Speed and the rookie 5th rounder out of Auburn, Jalen Simpson. Simpson's kind of a guy whose speed is on a different level than these other guys in the cornerback room. Also playing safety in college, you kind of wonder if he has that versatility to maybe pop back there in the pinch if you need him. When it came to special teams reps, which was what I was watching last night, Baker was getting more reps or earlier reps with that first team of the special teams units. Amir Speed would have been that next guy, and then Simpson when it just came to purely special teams. So I feel like Simpson does have a way to go on special teams to make the roster, which I feel like that would be his biggest obstacle here. Baker's kind of a guy who played a ton last year before Juju Brents got healthy. And then they kind of benched Baker in favor of Brents after a couple bad performances from Baker. But this preseason, this summer, he's kind of done the right things. He seemed like he's got that kind of those cobwebs of those rough performances behind him. But we'll kind of see if that bridge is burnt and that trust is gone between Gus Bradley and Ron Miles and Darrell Baker. And then for their 6th corner, just kind of looking at that group, you've got 2 guys on the outside and then 2 immediate backups there. And none of those 4 really have any experience playing inside in the slot. So you've got Kenny Moore, and then his immediate backup to this point has been Julian Blackmon in years past, just out of necessity. But this year, they've got Chris Lamons, who spent some time on the practice squad and on the active roster last year for the Colts. And he seems like a guy that the Colts trust. And then you have the rookie 6th rounder, Micah Abraham, who made that game-breaking play against Denver. It was against Denver. He stripped the ball from the running back, took it back 45 yards for the touchdown. Just kind of Twitter was a buzz about him. Everybody on the team was super happy for him. And by all accounts, he's been making some, maybe not as standout plays, but solid plays in training camp and these practices. So he, I think, may have done enough where he's not ahead of Chris Lamons on the depth chart at this point. While Lamons was dealing with his injury problem, Micah Abraham was the guy that was playing second team nickel. But as soon as Lamons got back, he kind of took that spot as second team nickel back. But I feel like kind of the splash plays that Abraham's had and just kind of the youth there and the contract situation on Abraham maybe dictates they don't want to lose both of these rookie corners or subject both of these rookie corners to waivers here right at the outset of roster cut. So I think they do what they can to hold on to one of them. And if you had to pick one of them more likely to play right now, I think Micah Abraham's that guy. Safeties, 5. This one's not controversial because there's really nobody that is being cut here and nobody that people aren't surprised about. So you've got Julian Blackmon, Nick Cross as the 1 and 2. That's kind of cleared itself up that there was going to be the 1 and 2 and kind of be interchangeable. Then you've got Ronnie Harrison, who's kind of this box safety, strong safety linebacker hybrid, and then you've got Rodney Thomas, who's kind of exclusively a free safety because you kind of have immediate backups to each position there, and then you've got Trevor Denbo, who's personal protector on punt, just a core special teams guy that I don't think they're going to be parting ways with. And then you've just got Marcel Dabo, the international exchange or player pathway program that they have an exception with, I believe, still. This may be the last season that he has this exception, which is essentially a free practice squad spot. So normally they keep 16. But if you keep 16, you can also keep Marcel Dabo as your 17th guy, and he doesn't count towards that limit. And then you've got a guy, Michael Tutsi, who came in as a safety, but really played most of his snaps at nickel in these training camp practices and in preseason, kind of being that fourth guy at nickel right behind Micah Abraham. So maybe he's a guy that you want to bring back onto the practice squad, but I don't see him making the roster. And then we've got the specialists, which is also not a interesting discussion, I don't think. Spencer Schrader kind of did everything he could to earn a roster spot, but really the reality of the situation is that you've got Matt Gay, who's historically been an accurate kicker who can kick deep on a big paycheck. And if you were to move on from him, I think he's making almost $6 million this year. If you cut him now, you'd be out about 10. So you're taking on about $10 million in dead cap if you moved on from Matt Gay. And you'd be moving on from Matt Gay, a historically accurate kicker, for a kicker who undrafted free agent out of Notre Dame, not a historically accurate kicker even in college. So you're kind of taking your chances and hoping for a huge progression from a guy like that. And while it's been nice to see him stepping in and making that 50-yarder yesterday, or 50-plus yarder yesterday, and then doing punting duties in week 2, not somebody that I think the Colts should be entertaining to be on the roster in place of either of the guys they already have in place. And that was position by position for the predictions. I know that's not going to be all right. Some of those are going to be wrong. I don't know if I necessarily even had a big surprise cut. I think Ashton Doolin maybe was the most surprising cut that I had listed on there. Maybe Taven Bryan. Some of these other guys that were maybe surprise cuts, I don't even think were cuts really, because that's Tanner Bordellini going on an injury list, Jelani Woods being on IR. So I don't think there was anything too controversial or too surprising in that prediction. But definitely argue with me on anything that you thought was incorrect there, anything that you think will go down differently come 4 days from now. Usually how the Colts handle these things, I know the Bengals released about 10 or 11 players today. That came out just after the Colts preseason game with them. So there's some news that might be trickling out across the league. The Colts usually handle it as they kind of release that whole list on their own, like right around deadline time. So right around 4 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday is when I expect to hear kind of the final results of how that roster is going to turn out, or how that initial 53. I'd like to call it the final 53, but we know there's going to be some waiver moves and some adjustments, some roster shuffling around. So my next show, the next episode of the Shoehorn Podcast, will be on that Tuesday. We'll be going live at 6 p.m. And that'll be 2 hours after the deadline to those roster moves. So I think kind of the topics that are going to be on hand for that episode speak for themselves. We're going to have breaking news within 3 hours of when I go live for the next episode of the Shoehorn Podcast, going over what the actual 53 is going to look like. So we'll be going over kind of what I suggested or what I predicted that didn't end up coming true, and kind of what we'll expect the next moves to be. Because, when they go down to 53, they're always looking around the waiver wire. Maybe we'll go over some names from other rosters that got cut that could be coming in, or Chris Ballard may have an interest in bringing in. But yeah, there'll be plenty to talk about. If you're watching this on YouTube and you weren't here for the live show, be sure to pop in for the live show Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays usually. Throw your comments in here. We'll talk about whatever. You guys kind of are the steering of the show. I'm willing to go off of whatever agenda that I have planned and kind of talk about what you guys want to talk about. So hop in the chat, and you can kind of steer the direct discussion. Ask any questions you want to ask, and we'll handle that way, man. All right. If you've got nothing else, that's going to be it for tonight. I will see you on Tuesday. Before that, on the Horseshoe Huddle YouTube channel, be sure to check out the Horseshoe Huddle podcast hosted by Drake Wally and Andrew Moore, my colleagues over here at horseshoehuddle.com. They've got you at 7 p.m. on Mondays and on Thursdays most of the time. So be sure to check them out. And then I will see you guys on Tuesday. Be sure to follow our coverage, our Colts coverage. We've got a lot of stuff going up with all this roster moves that are going down on horseshoehuddle.com, Indianapolis Colts on SI.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Colts on _SI. Follow us on Facebook. Just keep up with us on all the socials. Then you can follow me at Noah Gebert on X. I'll let you guys know when we're going live for the next show. I'll let you guys know what I'm thinking about the Colts roster, what I'm thinking about the upcoming season, and just all kind of tidbits throughout all season long. So that's it. You guys have a good night. I will see you on Tuesday.